I'm going to discuss with you the possibility of using therapeutic plasma exchange to either delay or negate immunosenescence. Before I start, I would like to give credit to my collaborators and good friends, Irina and Michael Comboy. The reason there is a lot of media exposure today and a lot of discussion about aging is evident here on this slide. A lot of people in the United States are over 65 years old. We live longer, but the population is sicker. It is estimated that 1 of 5 Americans will be 65 years or older in 2030, and in the world there will be 2 billion people in 2050 at that age. It's a chronic, serious problem, quite possibly the most significant healthcare problem in the world at the moment. And the World Health Organization has that as a priority to create some sort of a preventive measure to stop this literally epidemic. And as you can see here, 82% of people in Medicare have a chronic condition. Medicare is the healthcare organization that funds the treatment of elderly people in the United States. You probably have noticed that people really don't die of old age. People die of diseases. So the most common diseases that people die of in older age are infection and cancer, mainly infection. So chronic inflammatory diseases are the main problem. The expenditure for a patient with a chronic inflammatory disease in the United States is $14,000 per year, which is a lot of money. 7 of 10 patients die of a chronic inflammatory disease in the United States. So the annual cost of chronic diseases is huge. Chronic inflammatory diseases are 99% of this cost. So can anything be done about it? The obvious answer to that is to try to prevent these diseases happening in older people. So is this possible? So let's see what are the conditions that are most common in older people. As I mentioned, there are infection, poor response to vaccines, cardiovascular diseases, increased frequency of cancer and autoimmune conditions, and physical limitations. Now, all of these are caused by dysregulation of the immune system. In older people, this dysregulation is manifested by immunosenescence, and I'll try to show you what that means. So the underlying causes of chronic inflammatory diseases are inflammation, mainly chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and all this is caused by immune dysregulation. So before we go into the chronic inflammation, I would like to show you what acute inflammation is, which is the normal response of the immune system to infection or some other injury. I'll give you an example with the flu. If you have the flu, you know how in the beginning you're okay, but then you get worse and worse and worse, and you're sneezing and coughing and you have fever. And at top of the line here, at the nadir of the immune response, you feel really bad. But this lasts just a few days, and then what happens is that the immune system provides CD8 cells. These are suppressor cells that regulate the immune system. So the immune response will be stopped at that time, and slowly, but within several days, as you all know, you'll improve physically, and the immune system will get back to its dormant state, where there is no inflammation going on in the body. As opposed to that is the chronic inflammation, which is represented here with the red line. So instead of, we have the same acute response, but at the point where we have to have the regulation getting in place, what happens is that we have an aged CD8 cell, a suppressor cell that is not functioning properly, its phenotype is different, and instead of going back to the normal regulatory dormant state, there is a lingering inflammation, chronic inflammation. Of interest is the fact that it is not necessarily the organ that was the target of the acute inflammation that will suffer the chronic inflammation response later on in life. These graphs here, in the green ones, this is the risk and the incidence of stroke and myocardial infarction in patients who have had different infections. And you can see in upper respiratory tract infection, it is much more prevalent to have a cardiac event or a stroke after an infection. So chronic inflammation can cause all kinds of problems, including things that we don't think are caused by chronic inflammation, such as MI or stroke. So these are one of the phenotypes associated with aging. And as you can see here, all these molecules are pro-inflammatory. And these pro-inflammatory molecules are present in patients and in people who really may not have an acute disease or something that is clinically very significant, but they have all these markers in their bloodstream. It has been shown also that patients in advanced age also have a variety of autoantibodies, and the most common ones are ANA, antinuclear antibodies, as well as antiphospholipid antibodies. As you've been hearing here throughout these several days, there are specific autoimmune diseases characterized by specific autoantibodies, including the last talk we just heard. However, there are many autoantibodies that are present in most patients, not all, but most patients with autoimmune diseases that really do not define the disease, they just define autoimmunity. And ANA is one of them. The other one is antiphospholipid antibodies. These occur in many patients with autoimmune neurologic diseases and other diseases as well. So this is important, and I'll show you in a second why. It is important because along with the antiphospholipid antibodies, we have elevated fibrinogen, and both of these elements contribute to increased coagulation and heart attacks and strokes, which are much more common in elderly people. In terms of phenotype, it has been recently shown by groups both in Britain as well as in Japan that elderly people who do not do well, who have some chronic inflammatory conditions, have CD4 to CD8 ratio which is high. So CD4 are helper cells, and they help the production of antibodies, including autoantibodies. And suppressor cells, some of them, as I showed you, are regulatory suppressor cells and others are cytotoxic. So they are out there to kill cancer, to kill infectious agents. So this elevated ratio is common in people with advanced age. This is very interesting because many years ago, when I was first exposed to plasma exchange, everybody talked about the removal of antibodies, immune complexes, everything that we can identify in the plasma. Nobody had looked at the phenotype of patients with autoimmune diseases at that time. Monoclonal antibodies were just coming about, and nobody knew what was happening to this phenotype, if anything at all. And what we found in over 50 patients with autoimmune diseases is the same that we now find in elderly people, and that is the elevation of CD4 and the decrease of suppressor CD8 cells, which basically creates high CD4-CD8 ratio. So here we have a similarity between the phenotype of cells, both in autoimmune diseases as well as in people over 65. If we look closely in the other factors, there are a lot of similarities. The pro-inflammatory factors, autoantibodies, and the regulatory cells that basically help produce or regulate these substances are impaired as well. So as you're hearing here, and probably most of you know, with therapeutic plasma exchange, we treat more than 50 diseases. Most of these diseases are fairly uncommon, but if we have these conferences, as this one, we clearly have some success in treating these disorders. So the questions will come, well, we have similarities, can we try this in something else besides an exact autoimmune disease? We know that we can remove autoantibodies, fibrinogen, and immune complexes very effectively, and we have shown, and others have repeated our observations on numerous occasions, that we can revert the CD4 to CD8 ratio, which is very, very important in these patients. In order to do some human experiments, you have to first do some animal experiments. You need a model for proof of concept. And yesterday, at the opening remarks, we heard about translational medicine, which is a very hot topic these days. In 2005, my friends Irina and Michael Comboy published an article in Nature that really revolutionized medicine. It had to do with the rejuvenation of aged progenitor cells by exposure to a young systemic environment. They performed an experiment called heterochronic parabiosis. Just to refresh your knowledge of the Aristotle language, hetero means different in Greek, and chronos is time, so different time, heterochronic. And parabiosis in an experimental model, two animals, they obviously have to be chimeric, are connected through their circulation. All these immune cells that regulate the entire immune response in the immune system live in certain environment, and this environment is the plasma. If the environment is impaired, they don't have nutrition they need, or maybe they have inhibitory factors, so they don't function properly. Just to show you in real life how this works, this is Michael Phelps, who holds 7 world records. And he set up these records in a very well-controlled temperature of the pool, which is around 77 to 81 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you heat up this pool to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, he will swim probably as slow as you. So this is the parabiosis model when an older mouse connected to a younger mouse, and inhibitory factors from the older mouse go to the younger mouse, and intrinsic factors go from the young mouse to the old mouse. And what my friends have shown that the older mouse becomes younger and the younger mouse becomes older. In in vitro experiments, if you take stem cells or neuronal cells or myoblasts and you incubate them in plasma from 2 mice that are old, then the proliferation of cells in the gray zone is very small. But if you have the mixed plasma from the young and the old mouse in the parabiotic model, so we have 50% old, 50% young, so this is diluted blood, then there is very dramatic increase in the proliferation of these cells. So based on these results, a few years back, I published an article which is basically a hypothesis that intermittent heterochronic plasma exchange may be used as a modality to delay cellular senescence. So this means the translation from an animal model into a human model. So, as you heard earlier today, experiments in animals do not necessarily translate well in humans. We realize that we're not mice, so the exact same approach will be very difficult. It's tough to connect these two, but we can replace the young with a machine. And we've been hearing about a lot of machines these days here. So the question is not how we remove the blood, we know how to do that. We know how to separate it, and we know how to take the bad environment out. But what do we put back in? There have been postulations that the young plasma contains intrinsic favorable factors. Everybody's looking for the silver bullet, one molecule that will make a pharmaceutical company rich. That's what we're looking for. 3 years ago, Grifols invested $50 million in a company to look for this magic bullet. It's been 3 years, nothing. Nobody has been able to find any intrinsic factor that can rejuvenate. We do know that the removal of the inhibitory factors can rejuvenate, and we've seen this. So the question is, what do we replace the plasma that we remove? A lot of people will say, well, plasma from young people is a good thing to do. But is it? First of all, obtaining plasma from certain age people is not going to be that easy, and then you have all the regulations that exist not only in the United States but all over the world, which will make logistical difficulties. And what I'm really more concerned about, and I run a very large therapeutic apheresis program in the United States, we as well as others have shown that conventional plasma exchange with 5% albumin is associated with 3% side effect. However, the moment we use FFP, most commonly for microangiopathies such as TTP and HOS, then the adverse events go to 57%, and these are not the milder things that we see with ACD. These can be serious anaphylactic reactions that are associated with bronchospasm and, on a rare occasion, death. So exposure, in my mind, to this kind of adverse reaction potential in an experimental model is not justified. We are using a fluid that at the moment I call it Dobrist fluid because we're not quite ready for commercialization, but 95% of plasma, as you know, is water. So we use co-fractionation to remove what we really need, and these are the proteins, which are 5%. And if we compare our fluid with fresh frozen plasma, they're both heterochronic. The disease transmission is much less in our situation, and it's easy to obtain, while FFP is not going to be that easy. FFP is a modest antioxidant, and what we use is a very potent antioxidant. As you well know, in aged people, oxidation is a major problem and causes diseases such as age-related macular degeneration. What we use can be done in a doctor's office, while FFP can be used only in a hospital setting. So we have removed all the clotting factors, so fibrinogen and antiphospholipid antibodies are not in there. So we feel that this is a better approach than using straightforward plasma. So the current status of our protocol is we have performed in vitro human experiments to confirm the findings that I just showed you. We have 2 IRB approved protocols, and next month we're starting the real human apheresis. Sponsors are welcome as usual at any time. So we feel very strongly that this approach will yield positive results, and if it does that, then we have the potential to prevent the most common diseases in older age. We also have the potential for healthier and longer lifespan. We have the potential for significant healthcare costs savings, and even in a scientific symposium like this one, cost was coming up almost at every session. We have potential for growth of the apheresis industry, which badly needs that. And we have the potential for growth of outpatient chronic apheresis, which is the nature of the business if we're going to grow it. Thank you very much.